Hello, this is Dr. Rajkumar, Associate Professor of Instruction, University of Texas, San Antonio, Computer Science Department. Today we are going to talk about the course penetration testing. The course code is CS4453. In today's lecture, we try to cover the introduction to penetration testing and we'll go on, what are the different phases of penetration testing. So the content which we are going to discuss about this penetration testing is introduction to penetration testing and what are the operating systems that we use for our penetration testing course throughout. So that we mainly focus on Kali Linux and the installation part of your Backtrack Linux, which covers a lot of tools for reconnaissance phase, scanning phase, exploitation phase, and your post exploitation phase. So that we are going to talk about them, and then we are going to talk a little bit about the working with the attacking machine, how to install the tools on Kali Linux by following the command line prompt, that is starting the engine part. And then we talk about the use and creation of hacking lab, why we need to create this hacking lab separately. And then we give the brief about the phases of penetration test. So now comes to the point, what is a penetration testing? So in penetration testing, if we say, the penetration testing can be defined as a legal and authorized attempt to locate and successfully exploit computer systems for the purpose of making those systems more secure. So the process including probing for vulnerabilities as well as providing proof of concept attacks to demonstrate the vulnerabilities are real. So proper penetration testing always ends with specific recommendations for addressing and fixing the issues that were discovered during the test. So, on the whole, the penetration testing process is used to help secure computers and networks against future attacks. So, the general idea is to find security issues by using the same tools and technologies as an attacker. So these findings can then be mitigated before a real hacker exploits them. So penetration testing is also known as sometimes pen testing, PT, hacking, ethical hacking, white hat hacking, offensive security, red teaming. So it is important to discussing the difference between penetration testing and vulnerability assessment. Many people, many people in the security community, many people in the security community incorrectly use these terms interchangeably. A vulnerability assessment is the process of reviewing services and systems for potential security issues, whereas a penetration test actually performs exploitation and proof of concept. This is very important. This performs the exploitation and the proof of concept, that the attackers to prove that the security the issues are exist in this, right? So penetration tests go to step beyond vulnerability assessments by simulating hacker activity and delivering live payloads. So in this course, we will cover the process of vulnerability assessment as one of the steps utilized to complete a penetration testing, right? So in the pen testing world, it is not uncommon to hear the terms white hat and black hat, right? It is very uncommon of this one. Yeah. So it is, probably safe to assume that every few people get into hacking to become a super villain. So the problem is that journey to take the dark side is a slippery slope. So, however, if you want to be great, how to respect of your peers and the gainfully employed in the security workforce, you need to commit yourself to using your powers to protect and serve, to protect and serve, right? So the rules and restrictions become even more strengthened if you want a computer job which requires a security clearance. So in the pen testing world, as we said, it is not uncommon to hear the terms white hat and black hat to describe the jedis and Sith. That means, the terms white hat or ethical hacker or penetration tester will be used interchangeably to describe the, white hat and the black hat. That is, jedis are good guys, right? So it is important to note that ethical hackers complete many of the same activities with many of the same tools as malicious attackers in nearly every situation. An ethical hacker should strive to act and think like a real black hat at a hacker. So the closer the penetration test simulates a real world attack, the more value it provides to the customer paying for the penetration testing. So please note how the this the black hat and the white hat says in nearly every situation means even though white hats complete many of the same tasks with many of the same tools, there is a world of difference between the two sides. At its core, these differences can be boiled down to three key points. One is authorization, motivation, and intent. These are authorization, motivation, and intent. Right? So these are very important. Authorization and motivation, motivation, and intent. So these are very important. So in once the difference between this white hat and your black hats, it's all about the authorization, right? So now see, as said, the key difference between the white hat and black hat, we are saying authorization, motivation, and intent. So it should be stressed that these points are not all inclusive, but they can be useful in determining if an activity is ethical or not. So, the first and simplest way to differentiate between white hat and black hat is authorization, as said. So, authorization is the process of obtaining approval before conducting any tests or attacks. So once authorization is obtained, both the penetration testers and the company being audited need to agree upon the scope of the test. So the scope includes specific information about the resources and systems to be included in the test. So the scope explicitly defines the authorized targets for the penetration tester. So it is important that both sides fully understand the authorization and scope of the penetration testing. So white hats must always respect the authorization and remain within the scope of the test. Black hats will have no such constraints on the target list. So, in addition, clearly defining and understanding the scope of the test is crucial. So, the scope, formally defines the rules of engagement for both the penetration tester and the client. So, it should include a target list as well as specifically listing any systems or attacks which the client does not want to be included in the test. So the scope should be written down and signed by authorized persons from both the testing team and the client. So occasionally the scope will need to be amended during the penetration test. So when this course, be sure to update the scope and resign before proceeding to the test with the new targets, right? So the second way to differentiate between the ethical hacker, the another way to define the ethical hacker, or the difference between this ethical hacker and your black hat. So we simply say, if the attacker is motivated or driven by personal gain, including profit through extortion or other devious methods of collecting money from the victim, revenge, fame, or the like, he or she should be considered a black hat. So, however, if the attacker is pre-authorized and his or her motivation is to help the organization and improve their security, he or she can be considered a white hat. In addition, a black hat hacker may have a significant amount of time focused on attacking the organization. So in most cases, penetration testers may last 1 week to several weeks. So, based on the time allotted during the penetration testing, a white hat may not have discovered more advanced time intensive exposure. So, finally, what we can say, if the intent is to provide the organization a realistic attack simulation so that the company can improve its security through yearly discovery and the mitigation of vulnerabilities, so the attacker should be considered a white hat. So it is also the important to the uh, understand to the comprehend the critical nature of keeping penetration tester findings confidential. So, ethical hackers will never share sensitive information discovered during the process of a penetration testing with anyone other than the client. So, however, if the intent is to leverage information for personal profit or gain, the attacker should be considered a black hat. So it is also important to understand that not all penetration testers are carried out in the same manner or have the same purpose. So white box penetration testing, also known as the overt testing, so it is thorough and comprehensive. It is thorough and comprehensive. So that is we call the overt. So similarly, come to the goal of the test is to examine every nook and cranny of the target system or network. So this type of test is valuable in assessing the overall security of an organization. Because stealth is not a concern, many of the tools we will examine throughout our course can be run in vogues mode. So by disgrading stealth in favor of thoroughness, the penetration tester is often able to discover more vulnerabilities. The downside to this type of test is that it does not provide a very accurate simulation of how most modern days. or skilled attackers exploit networks. So it also does not provide a chance for the organization to test its incident response or earliest system. So remember, the tester is not trying to be stealthy, the tester is attempting to be thorough. So black box penetration testing, also known as covert, as said, we call this as the covert part. So what is this? Can say, as said, black box penetration testers, also known as your covert testing, employs a significantly different strategy. A black box test is a much more realistic simulation of the way a skilled attacker would attempt to gain access to the target system and network. So this type of test trades thoroughness and the ability to detect multiple vulnerabilities for stealthy and pinpoint precision. So black box testing typically only requires the testers to locate and exploit a single vulnerability. The benefit to this type of test is that it more closely models how a real world attack take place. So not many attackers today will scan all the ports. So the number of ports that can be scanned, it's all depends upon the total number of ports are here. But all these 65535 ports are not going to be scanned. Why? Because some ports are using port number 80, like HTTP. Like if you are using HTTPS, it uses 86 and so and so. Some SSH ports will be there, FTP ports will be there, right? So all the targeters, they don't use scan all the ports of 655 35 ports on a target. So doing so is loud and will almost certainly be detected by firewalls and intrusion detection system. So skilled malicious hackers are much more discreet. So they may only scan a single port or interrogate a single service to find a way of compromising and owning the target. So black box testing also has the advantage of the allowing a company to test its incident response produced and to determine if their defense are capable of detecting and stopping a targeted attack. So this is something about the white box tester and the black box tester. So now let us talk about what is a Kali Linux system and what are the different tools that are going to be used for the different phases of penetration testing, PT, right? So let us see. We'll try to cover the basics knowledge of Kali. Means what are the basic commands which we use for installing any applications to do the penetration testing, PT, and similarly another the operating system, Backtrack Linux. So we are going to give a brief idea about this operating system too. So here you can see few years back, the open discussion or teaching of hacking techniques was considered a bit taboo. Fortunately, times have changed, and people are beginning to understand the value of offensive security. So, offensive security is now being embraced by organizations regardless of size or industries. So, governments are also getting serious about offensive security. So, many governments have gone on record stating they are actively building and developing offensive security capabilities. So unfortunately, or we can say, the ultimately penetration testing should play an important role in the overall security of your organization. So just as policies, risk assessments, business continuity planning, and disaster recovery have become integral components in keeping your organization safe and secure. So, penetration testing needs to be included in your overall security plan as well. So, penetration testing allows you to view your organization, through the eyes of the enemy. So, this process can lead to many surprising discoveries and give you the times needed to patch your systems before a real attacker can strike, right? So it is one thing to know a tools is free. So before that, you see, one of the greatest things about learning how to hack today is the plethora and availability of good tools to perform your craft. So not only are the tools readily available, but many of them are stable with several years of development behind them. So maybe even more important to many of you is the fact that most of these tools are available free of charge. So for the purpose of this course, every tool covered will be free. So it is one thing to know a tool is free. It is another to find, compile, and install each of the tools required to complete even a basic penetration test. Although this process is quite simple on today's modern Linux operating system, so it is it can still be a bit daunting for newcomers. So most people who start are usually more interested in learning how to use the tools than they are in searching the vast concern of the internet to locate and install tools. So to be fair, you really should learn how to manually compile and install software on a Linux machine. Or at the very least, you should become familiar with the apt get. So apt get means what? The apt get means what? Before going to discuss that, as just said, these Kali Linux or Debian based distribution, they are basically used for your penetration testing, security, search, and computer forensics and reverse engineering. Anyone can go through this link and you can easily download. It is an open source operating system. You can download to work for work for the penetration testing purpose, right? So one of the major part which includes in this operating system is apt get. What is this apt? Apt is advanced package tool, is a package management system. So apt allows you to quickly and easily install, update, and remove software from the command line. Aside from its simplicity, one of the best thing about apt is the fact that it automatically resolves dependency issues for you. So this means that if the package you are installing requires additional software, apt will automatically locate and install the additional software. So this is a massive improvement over the old days of dependency hell. So installing software with apt is very straightforward. For example, let us assume you want to install a tool called Paras. If you want to install a tool called the Paras, suppose. Uh, yeah, if you want to install this tool, Paras tool, okay. So how it can be used to install this paral? We should issue the command line as apt get and apt get install the paras. So before installing any of the tools, you must update your the apt by giving the command that apt get update. Apt get update. So in this, in the paras, what this paras is a tool that can be used to evaluate the security of web applications. So we will discuss this, the use of proxy in the web-based exploitation, in upcoming lecture series. right? But once you know the name of the package you want to install from the command line, as we said in previous slide, you can run apt get install followed by the name of the software which you want to install. So it is always a good idea to run apt get update before installing software, as said in the previous slide. So this will ensure that you are getting the latest version available. So then we start giving commands like apt get update and apt get install for us, right? So before the package is installed, you will be shown how much disk space will be used, and you will be asked if you want to continue or not. So to install your new software, you can simply type y and hit the enter key. But when the program is done, the installing done installing, you will be returning to the the in the command prompt you will be returned to the hash function, right? So at this point, you can start Paras by just entering the following command into the terminal, like simply typing the command as Paras. So then it will open a new window for you, and which covers some kind of what are the type and responses. The type and responses will be covered here, right? So, if you prefer not to use the command line when installing software, so there are several graphical user interfaces available for interacting with APT. So the most popular graphical front end is currently Aptitude. So additional package managers are outside the scope of our course, right? So one final note on installing APT or the installing the software. APT requires you to know the exact name of software you want to install before running the install command. So if you are unsure of the software name or how to spell it, you can use the command apt search. You can use the command, the special command we call the apt cache search, and give the tool name or software name which you want to install. So after giving this, the apt cache search, so this handy function will display any package or tools which match your search and provide a brief description of the tool. So using apt cache search will allow you to quickly narrow down the name of the package you are looking for. So if you are unsure of the official name of the Paros package from our example, then we could have first run that apt cache search and Paras. So after reviewing these resulting names and describing, we would then proceed with the apt get install command. So please note, if you are using Kali Linux, Paras will already be installed for you. Even so, the apt get install command will still a powerful tool for installing the software. So a basic understanding of Linux will be beneficial and will pay you mountains of dividends in the long run. So for the purpose of this course, there will be no assumption that you have prior Linux experience, or but do yourself a favor and commit yourself to becoming a Linux guru immediate, or Linux guru someday. So take a class, read this course, just explore on your own. So trust me, you will thank me later. If you are interested in penetration testing or hacking, there is no way of getting around the needs to know Linux. So fortunately, the security community is a very active and very giving group. So there are several organizations that have worked, tirelessly to create various security-specific Linux distributions. So a distribution, or distro for short, is basically a flavor, a type, or brand of Linux. So they use this command as distro, this command, right? So among the most well-known of penetration testing, distribution, no, penetration testing distribution is one called your Backtrack. Okay, I repeat, among the most well-known of these penetration testing distribution is one called backtracking or Backtrack Linux. So, what is this Backtrack Linux? Means this Backtrack Linux is your one-stop shop for learning, hacking, and performing penetration testing. Backtrack Linux reminds me of a scene from the first Matrix movie where the tank asks Neo, "What do you need beside the miracle?" So Neo responds with guns, lots of guns. So at this point in the movie, rows and rows of guns slides in view. So every gun imaginable is available for Neo and Trinity. So this Backtrack Linux and Kali Linux are a security tester's dream come true. So these distributions are built from the ground up for penetration testers. So they come preloaded with hundreds of security tools that are installed. So that means the experience, most newcomers having experience, and how when they first boot up the Backtrack or Kali Linux tools, lots of lots of tools, right? So that's the reason I said these distributions are built from the ground up for penetration testers, and they come preloaded with hundreds of tools, as we said, that are installed, configured, and ready to be used. So the best of all Kali and Backtracks are free, and you can get your copy of your Backtrack from the given link here for penetration testing purpose. Right. So now let us think about working with this. So here you can see, working with these, regardless of whether you choose to run Kali or the Backtrack as either a virtual machine or live DVD, once the initial system is loaded, you will be presented with a login prompt. So the default username is root, and the default password is tour for this, the Backtrack operating system. This is default username is root, and password is the reverse of this one, TOOR, the tour one, right? So notice the default password is simply the reverse of your tour. So this default username and password combinations has been in use since Backtrack 1, and most likely it will remain in use for future version. At this point, if you are running the Backtrack, you should be logged into the system and should be presented with the command that roots at Backtrack. You find the command with the root at BT, and it follows the command of your hash, and it will appear like this. The same thing that you can find. Right? So here BT stands for your Backtrack. If you are using Kali, So you can find root at Kali, you find this one at Kali Linux. But we will a little bit describe about this backtrack one, right? So when this prompt appears to you, although it is possible to run many of the tools on this operating system that we will discuss in this course directly from some terminals, but it is often easier for newcomers to make use of the X Windows system. So you can start this graphical user interface by typing the command after this root as your start X for graphical user part. That means when you find the terminal as root at bt, and you find you simply write start X, so that the graphical user interface will be appears, right? So here you can see the description. After typing this start X, this command and hitting the enter key, X will begin to load, capital X. So this environment should seem vaguely familiar to most computer users. So once it has completely loaded, you will see a desktop, icons, a toolbar, and a system tray. So just like Microsoft Windows, so you can interact with these items by moving your mouse cursor and clicking on the desired object. So if you are utilizing Kali Linux, after logging in with the default root or tool usernames and passwords, you will be automatically loaded to the graphical user interface based genome desktop environment. So most of the program we will use in this course will be run from the terminal. So there are several ways to start the terminal. In most Linux distributions, you can use the keyboard shortcuts Control Alt T. The simple the terminal to open the terminal, we use the Control Alt T. So automatically a terminal will be open. In that terminal, you find this root at Kali, and you find this as function, from where you start installing by just giving the apt get update, or sometimes it may ask you the root one, so you can use the sudo, or you start installing apt get install and use whatever software tool that you want to the install, that you can follow these commands, right? So then comes to the part of this. Unlike Microsoft Windows or many of the modern day Linux operating system, by default some versions of Backtrack do not come with the networking enabled. So this setup is by design. So as a penetration tester, we often try to maintain a stealthy or undetected presence. So nothing screams, look at me or look at me. So I'm here. So like a computer that starts up and instantly begins spewing network traffic by broadcasting request for a dynamic host configuration protocol, a dynamic host configuration protocol server, and internet protocol address. So to avoid this issue, the networking interface of your Backtrack machine may be turned down, that's turned off by default. So the easiest way to enable networking is through the terminal. So open a terminal window by clicking on the terminal icon, and or if you are using this Backtrack, by using your keyboard shortcut, you can use Control Alt T. Once the terminal is opens, you can enter the command to check whether all the IP addresses, and you can by giving this command at the Backtrack root, that is root at backtrack, then you start giving this command ifconfig and give space and a. Give space and a. So what happens? This command will list all the available interfaces for your machine. At the minimum, most machines will include a ETH and a LO interface. ETH and LO interface. So what is this ETH and the LO interface? ETH and the LO interface, right? So the LO interface is your loopback interface, and the etho is your first ethernet card. So depending on your hardware, you may have additional interfaces or different interface numbers listed. So if you are running Backtrack through a virtual machine, your main interface will usually be ETH0. So to run the network card on, you enter the command to make this network card on. We need to enter the to make this etho on. You need to enter the command, the IP configure, which interface you are going to in IF configure, which interface you are going to making up. So select that one and then give the command up. So by giving this command, let us examine, right? This command is more detailed. Ifconfig is a Linux command. That means I want to configure a network interface. As we already know, Ethernet 0, but so Ethernet port 0 is the first network device on our system, and the keyword up is used to activate the interface. So we can roughly translate the command you entered as here: I want to configure the first interface to be turned on. Now that the interface is turned on, we need to get an IP address. So there are two basic ways to complete this task. Our first option is to assign the address manually by appending the desired IP address to the end of the command. To the end of the command. How? Here you can give IP configure, what you call the enable this or configure this interface, make it up, and you need, once this port is appeared, that means I'll just give a dramatical one, like you can find the port. For this port, this we call the, suppose this port is as your ETH0, then you need to give the assign an IP address to this one, so that you can give the private IP address. So here whatever you mentioned 192.1, so this IP address will be given to that. So that can be done in two ways. Manually means you need to enter this IP address, right? If you wanted to assign in our network card, suppose the IP address is 192.168.1.23, then we need to enter IP config etho up 192.168.1.23. But at this point, the machine will have an IP address, but will still need a gateway and domain name system servers. So as a simple Google search for setting up the network interface card NIC command, will show you, how to enter the information. So you can always check to see if your command worked by issuing the command, whether it is working or not, by issuing the command that IP configure space -a. So that can give the detailed information. So by running this ifconfig space -a, so this will allow you to see the current settings for your network in interface. So because this is a beginner's guide, and for the sake of simplicity, we will assume that stealth is not a concern at the moment. In that case, the easiest way to get an address is to use DHCP. To assign an address through DHCP, you simply issue the command DH client. You simply give the command DH client, this command. Okay, so that means how it looks like at root at backtracking, giving the command simply dh client, dh client, right? So please note, DH client will attempt to automatically assign an IP address to your NIC network interface card and configure all required settings, including domain name system and gateway information. So if you are running Kali or Backtrack Linux from a VMware player, the VMware software will act as the DHCP server. So regardless of whether you use the DHCP or statically assigned an address to your machine should now have an IP address. If you are using a Kali Linux, your networking should be pre-configured. So, however, if you have any issues, the upcoming sessions will help. So the last thing to address is how to turn off your backtrack or Kali Linux. As with most things in Linux, there are multiple ways to accomplish this task. Simply power off or switch off that one. Right. So now so these are the things which we covered up to now. Power R, startup. There's a before proceeding. That these are the step-by-step process which are given to follow to work on the Kali Linux part. So now the use and creation of the hacking lab means what? Every ethical hacker must have a place to practice and explore, right? So most newcomers are confused about how they can learn to use the hacking tools without breaking the law or attacking unauthorized targets. So this is most often accomplished through the creation of a personal hacking lab. So a hacking lab is a sandboxed environment where your traffic and attacks have no chance of escaping or reaching unauthorized and unintended targets. So in this environment, you are free to explore all the various tools and techniques without fear that some traffic or attacks will escape your network. So at the minimum, the lab is set up to contain at least two machines, one attackers and one victim. So in other configuration, several victim machines can be deployed simultaneously to simulate a more realistic network. So the proper use and setup of a hacking lab is vital because one of the most effective means to learn something is by doing that thing. So learning and mastering the basics of penetration testing is no different. The single and most crucial point of any hacker lab is the isolation of your network. Isolation of your the network part. So that is very important. So you must configure your lab network in such a way that it is impossible for traffic to escape or travel outside of the network. So mistakes happen, and even the most careful people can fat figure or mistype an IP address. So it is a simple mistake to mistype a single digit in an IP address. So, but the mistake can have drastic consequences for you and your future. So it would be a shame for you to for anyone to run a series of scans and attacks against what you thought was your hacker lab targets within with an IP address. Right. So here, for example, the yeah. So the simplest and most effective way to create a sandbox or isolated environment is to physically unplug or disconnect your network from the internet if you are using physical machines. So it is best to rely on hardwired Ethernet cables and switches to route traffic. So also be sure to double and triple check that all your wireless NICs are turned off. As said here. So we need to double check and triple check that all the wireless NICs are turned off. And always careful inspect and review your network for the potential leaks before continuing. So although uh, the use of physical machines to create a hacking lab is an acceptable solution, the use of virtual machines provides several key benefits. First, given today's processing power, it is easy to set up and create a mini hacking lab on a single machine or laptop. So, in most cases, an average machine can run two or three virtual machines simultaneously because our targets can be set up using minimal resources. So, even running on a laptop, it is possible to run two virtual machines at the same time. So, the added benefit of using a laptop is the fact that your lab is portable. So with the cheap cost of external storage today, it is easily possible to pack hundreds of virtual machines and a single external hard drive. So this can be easily transported and set up in a matter of minutes. So anytime you are interested in the practicing your skills or exploring a new tool, simply open up Kali Linux, Backtrack, or your attack machine and deploy a virtual machine as a target, setting up a lab like this, and it gives you the ability to quickly plug and play with various the operating system configurations. So another benefit of using virtual machine in your pen testing lab is the fact that it is very simple to sandbox your entire system. So simply turn off the wireless cords and unplug the cable from the internet. As long as you assigned addresses to the network cards, like we covered in previous slides, your physical machines and virtual machines will still be able to communicate with each other, and you can be certain that no attack traffic will leave your physical machine. So in general, penetration testing is a destructive process. So many of the tools and exploits we run can cause damage or take systems offline. The one. So that is the case of process that it is very destructive part. So we should keep our systems in a safer way, right? So as said, many of the tools and exploits we can run can cause damage, as said, and take system offline. So in some cases it is easier to reinstall the operating system or program rather than attempt to repair it. So this is another area where the virtual machine shine. So rather than having a typical the physically reinstall a program like SQL server or even an entire operating system of the physical systems, the virtual machines can quickly reset or restore to its original configuration. So in order to follow along with each of the what you call the examples in this course, you will need access to three virtual machines. What are those? One is the Kali Linux. Another one is the metasploitable, another one is Windows XP. Throughout this course, we follow this one to do the examples. So, what is that? This Kali Linux. The examples and paths in this course are taken from the Kali Linux or your backtracking one, and that will work as well. Similarly, Metasploit is a Linux virtual machine which was created in an intentionally insecure manner. So, Metasploit is available for free from the source target from the this link. And whereas your Windows machine, we call this, well, most of the exercises in this course will run against the Metasploit, and your Windows XP will also be used to target throughout this course notebook, the course. So with its wide deployment base and the past popularity, most people have little trouble getting in validity or the valid copy of your Windows XP. But default installation of Windows XP makes an excellent target for learning, hacking, and penetration testing part. Right? So, what are the different phases of the penetration testing? Different phases of the penetration testing. So, as said, the penetration testing divided into 4 phases. Like most things, the overall process of penetration testing can be broken down into a series of types or phases. So, when put together, these steps form a comprehensive methodology for completing a penetration test. So, carefully review of unclassified incident response reports or breach disclosures supports the idea the most black hat hackers also follow a process when attacking a target. So the use of an organized approach is important because it not only keeps the penetration tester focused on the moving forward, but also allow the results or output from each step to be used in this ensuring steps. So the use of a methodology allows you to break down a complex process into a series of smaller, so more manageable tasks. So understanding and following a methodology is an important step in mastering the basics of hacking. So depending on the literature or the class you are taking, this methodology usually contains between 4 and 7 steps or phases, but we cover 4, right? uh, Yeah. So the use we cover the 4 phases. So although the overall names and numbers of steps can vary between methodologies, so the important thing is that the process provides a complete overview of the penetration testing process. For example, some methodologies use the term information gathering, whereas others call the same process as reconnaissance or recon or even OSINT for the purpose of this course. So we will focus on the activity of the phase rather than the name. So after you have mastered the basic, you can review the various penetration testing methodologies and choose one that you'd like. So to keep things simpler, we will use a 4-step process to explore and learn penetration testing. So if you search around and examine other methodologies, which is important to do, so you may find a process that include more or less steps than we are using, as well as the different names for each of these phases. So it is important to understand that although the specific terminology may differ, most solid penetration testing methodologies cover the same topic. So there is one exception to this rule. The final step in many hacking methodologies is a phase called hiding or covering your tracks or removing evidences. So because this course focus on understanding the basics, so it will not be included in this methodology. So once you have a solid understanding of the basics, you can go on to explore and learn more about this phase. So what you call yeah so the remainder of this course will be dedicated to reviewing and teaching the following steps. One is your reconnaissance, another one is scanning, exploitation, and post exploitation, and the maintaining the access. So the reason we use an inverted triangle is because the outcome of initial phase of every the broad. So that's why we use this, the inverted triangle here, right? So as we move down into each phase, we continue to drill down to very specific details. So the inverted triangle works well because it represents our journey from the broad to the specific. So as we work through the reconnaissance phase, it is important to cast our nets as wide as possible. Right? So what is uh, this? So in many cases, penetration testers must access and the penetrate a series of related targets. As said, go through the reconnaissance, then the output of reconnaissance goes and input to your scanning. From scanning, it goes and input to the exploitation. From there, it goes and input to your post exploitation. From there, if anything is missing, then again it do this process. So this cycle goes. So before they can directly attack the original target, in cases each of these steps is often repeated. So the process of compromising one machine and then using the machine to compromise another machine is called pivoting. And the penetration testers often need to pivot through several computers or networks before reaching to their final target. Right? So the first phase is your reconnaissance phase. Here we are just give the brief idea about this one. In reconnaissance phase, it is deal with the information gathering about the target. So the more information you collect on the target, the more likely you are to succeed in later steps. So, regardless of the information you had to begin with after completing in depth reconnaissance, you should have a list of target IP addresses that can be scanned. Okay, so this list of IP addresses will be used, as your target. Then comes to the next phase, scanning. The second step in the methodology can be broken out into two parts, that is distinctive activities. One is first activity and second activity. In the first activity, it works on port scanning. Okay, whether the HTTP ports or HTTPS ports, FTP ports, your SSH ports, your UDP, your UDP ports, UDP, your TCP ports, right? So these different ports will be there. So once we have finished with port scanning, we will have the list of open ports and the potential service running on each of these targets. So the second activity in the scanning phase is vulnerability. First scanning the ports, then doing the vulnerability scanning here. So vulnerability scanning is the process of locating and identifying specific weaknesses in the software and service of your target machine. Then the output of this one goes to exploitation. Once we know exactly which ports are open and what services are running on those ports and what vulnerabilities are associated with those ports or those services, we can begin attacking our target. So tools which provide the button mass exploitation, the most newcomers associated with the real hacking. So exploitation can involve lots of different techniques, tools, and code, but exploitation can occur locally or remotely. And a local exploitation requires the attackers to have physical access to the computer, while remote exploitation occurs through the network and systems when the attacker cannot physically touch the target. And finally goes to the post exploitation and maintaining the access. The final phase we will examine is post exploitation and the maintenance. So the payload delivered in the exploitation phase provide us with only temporary access to the system. Because most payloads are not persistent, we need to quickly move into post exploitation in order to create a more permanent backdoor to the system. So, this process allows our administrative access to server program closer and even reboots. Right? Then the penetration testing execution standards (PTES) is a fantastic resource if you are looking to find a more in-depth and thorough methodology. So this penetration testing execution standard (PTES) includes both the technical guidelines that can be where secure professionals as well as the frameworks. So that can be leveraged by the business community. So you can find more information about that, the penetrationstandards.org from this link, right? So thank you. With this, I would like to stop the session here. And in the next session, we try to give the demonstration on the mission. Thank you.